Okay, this video is a recap of the presentation we did at the Toronto Azure Meetup last week. The topic is Linux Container Platform on Azure. We're going to show you some capabilities around Kubernetes, OpenShift. We're going to leverage Ansible and Ansible Tower for all the automation aspects. Essentially, we're going to provision all the Azure infrastructure leveraging Ansible Tower and some scripts we've written. We're going to move on from that. We're going to provision OpenShift leveraging Ansible, and we're going to provision a lot of applications on top of that. Daniyal's going to cover a lot of pipeline automation, leveraging some CI/CD processes, leveraging Jenkins and different tools to be able to automate the promotion of code into the OpenShift environment. So this is an introduction what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk a little bit about Docker and Kubernetes and how they compare to OpenShift. We're going to explain Ansible and Ansible Tower and what is it and what does it do. And finally, we're going to demo the Azure infrastructure automation we've put together, also the OpenShift provisioning. We're going to do a quick look at OpenShift, and then we're going to dive into some of the CI/CD pipeline automation. So really quickly, we'll just explain, if you haven't heard of Arctiq, what we do. We're primarily a services-based company working in the 100% software space. Our wheelhouses are really around continuous improvement, DevOps tooling, workflow automation. We also do a lot of assessment services, helping companies get off the ground with some lean practices and moving to microservices and automating a lot of their manual processes. This is kind of our motto up here in the top left corner. We like to do small projects that deliver value right away. We generally are working with the business, IT operations, and the development communities. And generally that works up from foundational, Linux-based activities and automation, leveraging best practice, all the way up to delivering full pipeline automation, moving applications into cloud environments, and again, really focused on automation. So let's dive into a conversation around Docker. So Docker is one of those really hot technologies that's been out there the last couple years, and the great thing about it is anyone can install Docker and be up and running on their laptop and pre-provisioning container-based applications right away. And these are just some of the simple commands you're able to do. So the reality is this doesn't really scale in an enterprise environment. We need an orchestrator. We need something that can manage all this and handle a lot of the important aspects that are required to run applications at scale and secure. So we really need more. If we look at some of the things we need, we need scheduling, we need lifecycle management, understanding where our assets are. We need to be able to monitor them and manage them and leverage capacity management tooling. Security is super important in this space, and if we're going to be moving our applications out to the cloud, we really need to think about security up front and not make it an afterthought. We need to scale these applications, not only the pods or the containers that are running on them, but we also need to be able to scale the underlying infrastructure. So when we have peak demands, we need to be able to leverage that, and then we need to be able to shut them back down to decrease our costs. We don't want to plan for the peaks, obviously. Persistency is important, and we'll get into some persistent storage discussions around data. Not everything is going to be ephemeral in these environments. We need things that can stick around. And aggregation of multiple containers and putting our applications in a space where they can communicate with each other securely is really important. So let's talk about Kubernetes a little bit. So Kubernetes is obviously released by Google. It was, a really great innovation in the space, and it brought together a real strong, powerful community building enterprise features and services. So, a lot of the things Kubernetes gives you is kind of motherhood now, things we need when we adopt containers. And it's a really rapid moving community. I know there's between updates you're looking at tens and tens of thousands of lines of code that are changing. It brings a lot of power, but it also brings a lot of change, and you want to be able to stay on top of these features. So one of the other things that we need is we need ops tooling. So a lot of these container technologies are focused on the developer and automating development aspects and testing and rolling through different environments. But in an enterprise environment, we have a team that's got to support this container environment. So operations tooling is really important, and networking becomes a real important feature. It comes with the SDN components. We need to obviously be able to look at metrics and logging. Images are really important. Self-service and APIs, and then obviously we need enterprise support and insurance in a lot of cases. What else do we need? There's lots of other things that come up when you start to move into a production-based environment. Obviously, role-based access. Who's going to have access to this? We want it to be multi-tenant, so it needs to be secure. We need to be able to collaborate and do quota management, and vulnerability scanning becomes really important. I touched on the security aspects, and training and education in this space is something that's important because it's new and a lot of people, haven't been exposed to it yet. So if we look at the core platform of what we're going to be talking about today is OpenShift. I look at OpenShift as kind of the enterprise version of all these new technologies, and it's primarily built on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Kubernetes, and then Docker being the container format. If you look at this diagram, it really brings together self-services, app services, lifecycle management, the operational tooling around metrics and logging, and then there's obviously a network stack. The nice part about OpenShift is it can be deployed anywhere. So in our case, we're going to deploy this in Azure, but it can also be deployed on physical infrastructure, virtual, private cloud, essentially any public cloud we can leverage to deploy this technology, and it's really easy. Gives you a nice standard framework to work off of. One of the main tools we're going to be using today is Ansible to automate this. So we obviously don't want to be doing this install manually all the time. We want to be able to automate these aspects as well as the code deployment. So this first piece is going to be about automating the infrastructure, and the infrastructure being Azure provided infrastructure. Ansible is a really powerful tool in the DevOps space and can be used for many, many things, and we're continuing to find new use cases for it every day. I mean, the main things that you're going to look at is really simple to learn and use. It's all human readable. It's using a language called YAML. No special coding skills. You can always start from a playbook that's out there in the community and then make it better. One of the nice parts about it is agentless, so it uses OpenSSH, uses WinRM for the Windows environment, so you don't have to install any agents. The fact that it uses native SSH is really nice because we get into a lot of use cases even around automation of network and getting into network gear. So how does Ansible work? If you look at this diagram, it's really about the user and leveraging playbooks. It has a concept of inventory. Obviously, everything's accessible via API. There's lots of modules in the space. So whenever you can leverage a module or a plugin, it's a really powerful way to get going. And then obviously we can leverage different cloud providers like OpenStack and VMware and Azure we're going to talk about today, but also other public clouds. So if we look at Azure and how we've leveraged Ansible, so obviously the requirement to get started is a simple Python SDK, and you can see in the bottom left there, all you have to do is do a pip install, and you're going to have the SDK. And then we can leverage Active Directory for our username and password and manage all our credentials. And then you'll see that we're leveraging variables in ways later, so we don't have to hard code all our scripts. We can simply pick up a script and be able to leverage it in another environment just by updating the environment variable. So again, we've done some research and we've looked at some of the Azure modules that are out there today. So these are just a list of few of them. You're going to see today we're actually leveraging the Azure CLI tooling that was released quite recently. So one thing we did notice is we had a lot of this written in the Azure version 1 CLI tooling. It's been updated for 2.0, so a lot of our scripts had to be rewritten. I don't think that's a common practice, but they have made some really nice changes to the 2.0 module, and we've been leveraging those. So let's just look at a really simple playbook to give you a quick look at Ansible. So you can see we've called this Azure Automation. We've opened up a couple ports. We've defined the max clients. We're leveraging root in this, but there's also ways to leverage sudo and not have to use elevated privileges. So in this case, we're simply going to create a storage account. And we're going to give it a name. And we're going to define it in the LRS tier. One thing you're going to see today is we're going to leverage Tower. So a lot of people start with Ansible, and then in the enterprise space, they want to go and, get some more visibility, some control, some role-based access, some audit, and a centralized place where they can run these playbooks and orchestrate all this. And there's lots of new features coming into Ansible that we're going to talk a little bit about. But Ansible Tower becomes a really popular tool in the enterprise space when you start to leverage Ansible rather than everyone out just running their own playbooks as their own user. It can get a little dangerous and you can lose control of the environment a little bit. So Tower's the enterprise skin that puts on top of the power of Ansible. So I already talked about it. You see there's a Tower obviously has a web UI, and you can leverage the web UI. It's a RESTful API. We've got role-based access. You don't need to have privileged users to run these playbooks, and obviously we're going to log everything. It's great from a compliance and security perspective. If we look at Ansible from what it can do. This is kind of the slide that I look at, being Ansible up top, leveraging CLI. And obviously Ansible is an open source project. It comes with many plugins, and then really the idea is to automate everything, not just infrastructure and virtual machines, but you can automate the network. You can leverage it to automate containers and cloud and services and things like that. There's lots and lots of use cases. There's people coming up with new use cases every day. It really is a Swiss Army knife to everything we're going to be able to show you today. So if we're going to dive into the Azure infrastructure demo, and what we're going to do is we're going to provision a fairly large environment, and this is really what we're provisioning. This is a high-level architecture view of OpenShift. It contains a bunch of virtual machines broken into masters. We've got infrastructure nodes, we've got application nodes, we're leveraging persistent storage, we've got all the networking aspects to look after. So if we want to provision all this, we're going to do this through a couple different playbooks. And the first one's going to provision all the infrastructure components that we need, and be it all the pieces that build up our Azure service. And then after that, we're going to provision all our virtual machines, and then we're going to dive in and provision the OpenShift container platform after that. So let's dive into the demo.